Welcome to the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, a weekly broadcast sponsored by CVC Coaching, hosted each week by industry speaker, coach, author, and educator Jerry Eisenhower. Our presentations are produced to assist business owners and managers in turning their business dreams into their business realities. And now, here's your host, Jerry Eisenhower.
And I want to thank you once again for joining us here at the Chimney and Fireplace Network. This show is sponsored every week by CVC Coaching. We have coaching programs, educational programs, but hey, the purpose of this podcast is to share with you a lot of good stuff and a lot of good ideas and a lot of gold nuggets that you can put to work in your business. And just like every week we go out, we try to find a great guest that we can bring onto this show. And what it's all about sharing with you and sharing ideas that you can put to work in your business to take you to that new level, that next level, whatever it is that you envision. So this week I've got a guest on, and give you a little bit of background. I've known this guy for a lot of years, and a lot of people may not know this. He was actually an officer of the National Chimney Sweep Guild and Chimney Safety Institute of America, and he served as an officer. He was secretary of both groups, if I remember correctly, and my memory is usually pretty good. Also, he took on a lot of projects, and this guy's one that I could always depend on. I knew he would always deliver them. A lot of the public safety brochures that CSI publishes and sells and distributes, this guy was the one that took that project and took it to a higher level. So this week, my guest is Bart Ogden from Home Safes out in Wichita, Kansas. And also, those that don't know, Bart donates a tremendous amount of his time to a volunteer organization that he believes heavily in that helps crippled children and other, and it is called the Shriners. And Bart has went to a very high part in a leadership position. So he's a person with a lot of leadership skills, but that's not why we got him here today. So Bart, you out there with me, brother, ready to start this?
I certainly am. Greeting from the plains of Kansas.
There you go. And I presume it's probably a little warm out there today, ain't it?
It is definitely getting serious about getting summertime here on the plains.
I got it, brother. Well, listen, tell me a little bit, Bart, when you entered the chimney service industry many, many years ago, how'd you get trained back in those days? How did you get the training you needed to do this job? Now, we were in a more of an infancy, but again, we had to know a few things. So how did you get your initial training?
Well, let me back up just a little bit before that and give you a little bit of my background growing up. Currently, I live in Wichita, Kansas, which is a general metro area of somewhere around 750,000 people. Now, I grew up in a little town about 60 miles southwest of here called Attica, Kansas. And that's a town of about 600 on its best day, probably Mother's Day weekend, when everybody's home visiting. Our basic claim to fame in Attica is the fact that the next county over is where Martina McBride and her family grew up. So where I grew up, number one, at an early age, I learned that we had to make our own entertainment and be self-sufficient. I grew up in a commercial roofing and remodeling family. My mom and dad and my grandfather and grandmother owned a roofing company, and both my dad and my grandfather were absolutely self-taught with basically everything they did, and that was starting in the 1950s and beyond. You know, my grandfather had a furniture store in downtown America, downtown Attica, Kansas, a little town. Neither my dad or my grandfather had any formal education past high school. So really from an early age, I learned to watch and read and do and teach myself how to do things. That's just the way I grew up, which is completely different from what's going on with today's society in a lot of instances. So in the winter of 1978, 1979, of course, was living at home, and we had the infamous orange teardrop cat eye fireplace in the front room. It was one of the Sears models that had the orange enameled pipe in it. And we're sitting there one evening, and all of a sudden that orange pipe started glowing cherry red. And we heard a big rumbling. And of course, in a small town, my dad was on the volunteer fire department. So he jumps outside, he gets the hose, goes up on the roof. Of course, being in the roofing industry, he had ladders, jumps up on there and puts a little water on it. And he said, okay, it's out. So as a little kid, I remember asking him, what happened? What happened? And he says, well, we've had a chimney fire, I think. And the key was to that is, I think, because you see, nobody had ever heard of a chimney fire. This was in 1979. Of course, the Arab oil embargo was just getting ready to get fired up at that point. You know, of course, as a young guy, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to that. So Dad purchased an 8-inch round brush kit from Sears and Roebuck at that time, and we still actually have that brush kit. It's tucked up in the corner of the warehouse. He cleaned the chimney and said, yep, that's what it was. It must have been a chimney fire, so we're all good to go. So the following August 15th of 1979, Mrs. Clifford Robinson, who was the bank president's wife in Attica was big enough to have a bank at that point. Dad had done all of her work for years and done the bank's work and everything. And she called up, and I don't particularly remember this, but Dad tells me that Mrs. Robinson talked like Katharine Hepburn in her later years. And he said she was on the phone, and he said, she asked, Alvin, do you know anyone that cleans chimneys? And of course, I'm sitting there in the front room, probably watching TV, doing a lot of nothing. And he looks over and he says, yes, I do, Mrs. Robinson, and he'll be right up. So he hangs up the phone, says, hey, I want you to get in the pickup, go down to the shop, grab a shop vac and that chimney brush kit we've got, go up to Mrs. Robinson's house and clean their chimney. So being the good son that I was, I said, sure, okay. Did that, grabbed an old shop vac and grabbed that 8-inch round brush kit with the old fiberglass screw together rods with the 3/8 couplers on them. Went up to Mrs. Robinson's house, told her that I was there to clean the chimney, set my little vacuum up in the front room of their masonry fireplace, went up on the roof, set my ladder up, and immediately I discovered that I had an 8-inch round brush, but it was a 10.5 by 10.5 inch square flue tile. So I guess that was probably one of the first steps in this trade of learning how to work on the fly, because I just kind of looked at it and thought, well, I guess I just wiggle it around a little bit till I determined that it's clean. I did, went down inside and swept a little bit of stuff that was in the firebox. Of course, I had no idea that there was anything that I was supposed to clean in the back of the damper. So I cleaned that up, put the tools back in the truck, and Mrs. Robinson came up to me and she says, well, how much do I owe you? And I said, well, I suppose $40 will cover it. Now you got to remember that in 1979, I'm literally 14 years old at this point. I'm on a learner's permit, it's driving in a small town, but I've got a 1967 Mustang. $40 worth of gas in 1979, buddy, I could run for a long time on that. I was the king of the world. So that's where I started, I guess. That's the starting of the business that we've created to this point. And I've just always learned or found a way to make it happen. Back in the days, back in the late 70s, early 80s, there wasn't really a lot of information to be had in Kansas. On the East Coast, I'm sure there was more because the trade had been kind of reviving itself at that point. But, the stuff that we had, and I actually was looking through my office shelves earlier today because I keep a lot of this stuff around just to remind me of where we've come from. But we had books, and I've still got these, Wood Heat Safety, J. Shelton's Solid Fuels Encyclopedia, Bartok's Heating with Coal, of course, Be Your Own Chimney Sweep, and Chimney and Stove Cleaning by Christopher Curtis, Donald Post, the complete book of Heating with Wood, of course, August West Systems Training Manual, a Black Magic Operations Manual. The point of all that is, if we could find a book somewhere, we grabbed it and we read everything we could get our hands on. So that's really how we started out here in the middle of the United States was just reading and doing. And that's really the only thing that we had to grab onto. Of course, today we've got all kinds of other options, but back then we actually went to a thing called a library and checked books out or found books. Of course, we didn't have online. We just had to get secondhand stuff or whatever we needed to do. But it was absolutely in the early days of the industry and absolutely 100% self-taught.
And you know, as you were telling me that whole story, Bart, because to be honest with you, I've never heard that before as many times. And do you know, and through my mind at this whole time, when you said Mrs. Robinson, my mind went to The Graduate. And I was envisioning Dustin Hoffman, and I was envisioning Mrs. Robinson the whole time, Bart. And it's like, that's a story, that's a start of a book, Bart. I'm telling you, that was good. And like I said,
instead of like The Graduate where he said, son, the future's in plastics, I guess he could have said, son, the future's in creosote.
that's it, brother. I mean, that was a good one there. So another thing that I want to say that I forgot to mention on this was, Bart, at one time, you were moderating mixed groups around the country. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
So back then you were a member of groups, but you also moderated, which means you did what Hope Stevenson is doing today, and you were the person that moderated. How many mixed groups did you moderate when you did that, Bart?
I was dealing with 2 at one point, and for everything that I was doing here locally as well, that was plenty. But mainly I dealt with 1 that kind of evolved out of the Clay Lamb era of where he basically brought mixed groups to the industry.
Yep. So this enabled you to visit, and during your career as a mixed group moderator, you actually visited many chimney sweep operations and saw what they were doing up close and personal. Would that be true?
We saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're right.
That's what I mean. So you were able to go in and you worked in mixed groups as a participant, graduated up to being a moderator of them, and actually made the arrangements, served as it, because I was in the original industry mixed group, which was one that Clay and Steve Piedla formed, and you were in the ones after that one, if I remember correctly. But
Yep.
Here's the whole thing. So let me ask you a question. How does that training work out today doing that? Is that what people need to do is Mrs. Robinson call them? Or how's that system going to work in today's world?
Well, I mean, I guess you could do that if you really just didn't like yourself very much. You and I have been around for a long time dealing with this, and really there are options now that instead of just being a one-on-one, even a mixed group type of process, with the discussion groups, of course, with Facebook and the private groups on there, there's no reason for anybody to walk through the minefield that we've already walked across. I mean, there's a lot of us in the industry that have already done this and found a lot of the shortcuts. In general, I think an entrepreneur, in an odd sort of way, tries to find the easiest way to do things. In fact, you could almost look at, okay, how does a lazy person deal with things? They try to find the shortest cut. Except I think an entrepreneur tries to find the shortest cut that maximizes revenue and profits. Anymore, over the years, like with fast track training, we've heard that for years, and there's been a lot of attempts to put that together, and there's not been a lot of success with that until recently. And I've looked at that and thought, why were we just all spinning our wheels for such a long time? And frankly, I think that it's just because until recently, technology hasn't caught up with our minds as far as what we wanted to do. We just didn't have the options of doing online meetings or having places to where we could have the tools to pull all this information together, to find the information, store it, and then roll it out in an organized manner to our team members.
Okay.
And you know, one thing that we've got to deal with nowadays is the fact that today's employee isn't like the employee of 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. You know, when I was growing up, one of the big things was, well, I'm going to work for this company and I'm going to retire for this company. And I just don't think today's employee, a typical employee, is typically going to be what I would call a lifer. You know, I think it's critical that in the short time overall that we've got these people, that we find a way to move them from trainee to technician. Over the years, I don't know how many people I've heard say, well, you know, I don't feel comfortable letting someone get out on their own truck until they've ridden with me for a couple of years. And that just drove me crazy, because I mean, I've seen businesses grow, I've seen businesses fail, I've been on both sides of that deal myself. You know, and when you've got that outlook and mentality of, well, they've just got to ride with me for a couple of years and watch what I do, you know, the business owner that has that mentality or that outlook, that business is going to be so stifled to even attempt growth, let alone achieve something that's even measurable. For example, let's say you've got Joe that hires on, and Bill's the guy that says, well, I just need you to ride with me for 2 years and you know, watch what I do and copy what I do. Well, by the time Joe rides with Bill for 2 years, he's developed the mindset, in my mind, of an assistant, that he's just there to help, and not the mindset of a lead, what I would call a lead technician. I also think that during that same process, I think that Joe is going to pick up a lot, if not all, of Bill's bad habits. And that's even if Bill is the owner. And I can tell you that I speak from experience with that, because I've never been the guy that says, well, I need somebody to ride with me for 2 years. But in the past, I have been a guy, because I didn't have any way to do it otherwise that I could figure out or come up with to where I could train somebody. And, you know, over a 2-year period like that, there's another thing that I feel it happens. You know, if everybody thinks of when they started something new, whether it was a new job, whether they found a new restaurant, whether they made a new friend or whatever, or joined a new club, joined a new organization, our brain is highly stimulated when we are exposed to new ideas and new things. And I think that during the first 90 days, especially when we're onboarding someone, whether it's at our company or someone else's, I think that the first 90 days for that trainee are so crucial, because that's when their brain is really absorbing the most. And we've kind of had a mindset, and I think it's kind of spreading throughout the industry, is the fact of, we used to think, well, maybe I can just find somebody with experience. You know, this guy comes along, he's had 3 years experience, you know, he can run a truck, he can run a brush, he can run a trot line, whatever. You know, the problem we have with that is that guy's got a lot of stuff that we typically have to fix to get him plugged into our system. So with the new ways, with the training systems that are online now, I guess, as you know, some of them are called virtual training, e-learning, whatever. They're just getting to the point now to where we're getting ready to see a huge paradigm shift in this industry. And I can relate this to one other thing. This has been evolving. For example, some of the certification organizations have gone through different variations or versions of training programs. And some of them, Jerry, they've been horrible. They've been almost painful to sit through, bad audio or whatever, because it's just recording somebody at a convention that, you know, the audio is horrible, or you get to listen to them answering questions or whatever. With the new training systems that are at our fingertips, literally for almost nothing, in the whole scheme of things, you can really fine tune it to where you have the opportunity to start from day one with trainee Joe and mold that person, or in fact, or Josephine, because we would love to have lady technicians here as well. We just haven't had any apply. But you can take those people and you can mold them to exactly the kind of technician that you want to do, but it takes a lot of planning to do that. So overall, with the way the world is running now at Mach 2.5, we just don't have a lot of time like we did in the past. So it's crucial that we get somebody, when we bring them on board, we plug them into a system that we've thought out, and then we engage them.
You know, Bart, as you were just talking, I can remember you and your dad, Alvin. I can remember you coming back in the Palm Pilot days where you had this little fold-up keyboard and using a Palm Pilot. Do you remember that, Bart?
I do. In fact, that was about the time that the D&D seminars. In fact, I do remember I was at a D&D seminar. I believe it was in Reno, that I had that Palm Pilot, and that has been a lot of years ago.
Correct, but the thing I remember about that is you sat there with a Palm Pilot and you had a keyboard. Now, nobody has Palm Pilots anymore. Smartphones and whatever is replacing tablets. But I can remember you and your dad sitting there. But the whole problem was you had to travel there. You had to travel home. You had the expense of that travel. And under the new systems, now you can simply click a button and that same type of training, it's right there at your fingertips, correct?
That's absolutely right. You know, the biggest thing, and I don't want people to take this wrong, but I'm sure somebody will. So I'm just going to preface it with this. With conventions or training at a distance, the business owner of today really has to decide, is there true return on investment on the amount of money that they're going to spend? With travel the way it is, and travel as hard as it is, I mean, it's tough to get through an airport anymore with security and flight delays and overbookings. That just the convenience and the ability to literally train maybe in the morning for an hour or so, and then go out and earn some money, and then maybe do that once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever. To also have the ability for a trainee to do some studying at home, to literally pick the phone out of their pocket. The capability to do that is just, it's phenomenal. We happen to use iPads here at HomeSafe, and I'm not any kind of person that's stuck for Apple products. It just happened to be that we got onto the tablets because that's the way our online dispatching system works, is it works with Apple products. So we adopted iPads, I think I'm going to say around, oh man, maybe 2012, something like that. It's been a long time ago. But with our guys, whether they're assigned a company iPad or if it's with other companies that are assigned, you know, some sort of Galaxy or some other tablet there, literally, you know, if they've got an hour, they can do an hour of training in between other things. But the fact that you can do it at home, you don't have to deal with the travel, it's focused and interactive. That's just such a huge deal. It's really hard to even get your mind around sometimes.
You and I were talking about 3 years ago, Bart, and you told me then, and you're a guy I listen to because you got a pretty wise head on your shoulders, but you told me then that you felt that the secret to success in this business was going to be the ability to train a fully skilled and trained service technician in the 90 to 120 day range. And that was 3 or 4 years ago. And even as a trainer, I couldn't visualize how we could do that. I couldn't get my head around it. But now, like you say, you said something a while ago. At one time, many of the systems had to have a certain type of hardware. You're on an iPad because it worked with what your dispatch system was. because what you use doesn't work with Android. But today's systems work with any kind of hardware. Have you noticed that?
With just being an internet portal based, yeah, I mean, you can tie into anything. Even if you don't have a computer at home, you can go to a coffee shop or somewhere, and I mean, you're there. It's instant connectivity.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little further. What about you experienced people? One of the things that you and I have talked about, and one of my opinions is that certification is not a graduate degree. Certification is a portal to go to increased learning. So do you agree that experienced employees need training also to keep them on top of their games? And can virtual e-learning accomplish that also?
Well, Jerry, I would take it one step further. I'm not for sure that experienced employees don't need the training even more than a new employee to a certain extent, because I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure if everybody did a little bit of self-examination and self-reflection, once you get, quote, certified, it's really easy to rest on that and think, well, you know, I've got all these certifications, blah, blah, blah. But it goes back to my dear friend, the late Jack Pixley. He was an educator all his life, and he always signed off on any email or any correspondence with always learning. And that stuck with me from the day I met Jack till the day he passed away. I think too many people think that once you're certified, you've arrived at some magical destination, and that is absolutely not true at all, especially in this trade. You know, there are things to learn on almost a daily basis, and I think that's one of the reasons that I love this career, is that even though it's the same on a day-to-day basis, it's different throughout the day, and it's different from job to job. I mean, we have the best view from our office in the world when we're up on top of the rooftops and looking out. But you know, the modern hearth technician is going to have to understand that they have to be able to learn, they have to be able to understand, and they have to be able to communicate so many things to their client, whether it's combustion theory, flow dynamics, hydraulic theory, physics, the effect of atmospheric pressure or altitude, or even, you know, how to relate to the client, how to paint a picture and evoke emotion to close a sale. All that's a key to being successful in this business. And you go back to the online training, it's not just nuts and bolts and technical stuff. It's the ability to learn how to sell to people, how to build relationships with people. And in the past, so many of us, me included and me on the front row, we're limited in our skill set as far as, okay, how do you do something like that? How do you teach somebody how to do that? Maybe when I don't even know how to do that. Well, with the online systems that are out there now, you can plug in with sales training. You know, there are some people that are getting plugged into the chimney and hearth industry that I look at these guys and I think, good grief, for a little bit of nothing on a monthly basis. And let's just throw a figure out there. Let's say online training costs you $500 a month, whatever it is. And ours has a varying figure. We use several different systems. But let's just say that we put a figure out of, okay, I'm going to need to spend $500 a month every month for the next 5 years to get my guys to a point where I think they need to be. You're hiring some of the people that are just incredible communicators and have an incredible amount of knowledge that they can pass along, that you don't have to worry about your employees maybe looking at you and thinking, well, we listen to that guy every day. When someone comes in from outside, typically they have an air of, I guess, an air of just being the sensei coming in from the dojo. And, you know, those people instantly have some respect just by being an outsider to your organization. But the ability to put people on staff that are true leaders and true professionals and respected people throughout this industry as well as other related industries for a little bit of money per month. I mean, that's amazing if you stop and think about that.
It is. And you know, when you look at it and you see, like I said, the outside experts that are now available to you, the Gittimers, the Wingets, the McCains, the Penningtons, the list goes on. You know, it's really remarkable. So you've started using this new training method. It's actually called a learning management system. LMS is short for it, but we call it e-learning. We call it virtual. We call it online. So was there a magic moment one day? Did somebody say something that just a bell clicked and said, this is my answer, Bart? What was it that, you know, I call it magic moments. Was there a magic moment one day that said, hey, this is my answer?
Well, I think I had a lot of little moments that led up to a big moment. I can tell you that for about the last probably, I'm going to say I probably started working on my process in about 2016, maybe late 2015, middle of 2015. And we were starting to gather as much material as we possibly could to start to assemble what I would call, I guess, our internal curriculum here. The problem is okay, I'm involved in the business. I'm also working on the business. I'm doing estimates. I'm doing marketing. I'm trying to lead a team of people here. And the problem is I never could really get enough time to dedicate to really put together what I needed to. And in the summer of last year, I attended an event where they were basically rolling out some online education. And when I saw the presentation on that and I saw the speakers that were available on that, it just made total sense to me in the fact that this was some way that they already had stuff put together with this particular system that I was already working on. In fact, we come to find out I had some of the same stuff that they had. Then the other training systems started to evolve around, and it just got to the point to where, again, I saw where I could put some leading people in the industry on staff for a monthly fee and capitalize on that and leverage my time. That's just what it came down to, was that.
You even told me that you had investigated you and actually leasing your own LMS system at one time, where you actually said, I took a look at this to see if I, you know, about using it, building my own. Do you remember that, Bart?
I do.
Okay. So here's the question for you. You have moved forward, and you've moved forward in a way that I think it would be a model for anybody. So what have you done to make this style of training work for you and your company? Because here's the whole thing, and we need to make this real evident. If you're just going to go into virtual training and turn it on, it's going to fail. There's going to be work on the employer's part, on the manager's part, and there's work involved in-house. So tell them a little bit about what you did to make this training work for you and your company.
Okay, so once I guess the light bulb clicked on, or basically I brought out the credit card and said, sign me up, then it was time for me to go to work. What I did is, number one, I had to get my head around the amount of information that was available, and it's vast, and it's becoming almost like standing in front of the old set of World Book encyclopedias. I mean, there's a lot of information that's there, and it's been there before. It's just not been in a centralized spot. I mean, it's easy to get to chasing down a rabbit hole on Google or whatever, but once it started coming together and I saw what was available to us, here's what I did. I basically came into my office. There wasn't anybody around, and I locked myself in. I mean, not literally, but I basically shut the door on a weekend, started way before dawn on a Saturday morning, and finished way after dark on a Sunday night. And I took all of that information and I got it together in front of me. And then I looked at, okay, how do we put this in a logical form so that I can take a guy or a gal that doesn't even know how to spell Chimbley to a person who can go out and sell something, who can be a competent service person. And once I got that done, I already had the buy-in on myself because the light bulb had turned on. I mean, I'd already committed to it. I said, just as soon as this is ready to roll, I mean, send me an email. I'm ready to go. I'm in. I'm all in. And once I did that and had my blueprint, I guess, and basically I based it on a 120-day training system, 90 to 120 days, depending on exactly who I was dealing with. From then, I got all my ducks in a row, and I made sure that the other administration in the office understood what was going on here, what I was getting ready to pull the trigger on. And, you know, a big word of today with business is culture. And we've just adapted training into our culture. You know, training used to be something new. But now it's part of our weekly routine. Think of it like this, and I approached it from this way as well. Think of a firefighter, okay? They train every day, just over and over and over on the basics. And that's just their normal stuff. But then they have some special stuff, some advanced stuff, and that's all designed so that when the need arises, that firefighter doesn't even have to think. It's an automatic, almost an involuntary reflex to the situation at hand. So I took all that stuff together, got it together. I put it in a logical format. I put it in what I would call an aggressive format because I want people to understand, and that's what we've got in our culture, is the fact that this isn't an optional thing. This is part of what we do. This is part of who we are. This is part of us backing up the brag of we're Wichita's fireplace experts. Not only do we say that, you know, we talk the talk, but we can walk the walk, and that's part of the whole system and part of the culture. So what we've really done is I happen to use an Excel spreadsheet. I like working with spreadsheets. I'm a visual guy. I can print these out. I can see them all out on the desk, and I can follow the path through there. And by doing that, it gave me what I would call a written roadmap to training success. And by doing that, I can put that across the desk to somebody, to a potential employee, and say, okay, this is part of who we are. And you know, if a potential hire doesn't look like they're going to buy into that, then they're not the potential hire that I thought they would be, and they're going to get excluded from the process. So at the same time, once you have that written roadmap out, there's an expectation that's out there, because not only is it just a roadmap to where we want to go with training and where we're going, but it's dated. It's not well, just kind of do it when you think you ought to. It's no, this is due, just like any kind of homework in a college or VOTEC or anything like that would be. And that's the way we treat it, especially with new people that are coming on board with our team. I can tell you that I just ran a guy through that process, and that guy was certified at basically the 100-day mark, right on the money. Will that work with everyone? Maybe, maybe not. But, you know, unless the business owner or the responsible person, the accountable person in the company puts that out there and basically tells the trainee or your current team that you guys are accountable for completing your homework and being prepared when we're ready to roll on this. And then he also or she also tells that team that not only are you accountable for doing that, but I'm accountable for making sure that I have my stuff ready and that I'm ahead of you guys and gals rolling this out. So it's a lot of accountability, and that's really what's helping our company in-house, be more successful as far as getting the same information out to everyone in a manner that is easy to access, easy to understand. It's easy to test comprehension and retention on. It's wild the way it works out. And once you get involved in the systems, and really get your head around the capability of them, then you can really start flying with it.
Yeah, and what I've heard you say, and I just want to make sure because I want to add to that, this process is explained to people in your recruiting, your interview, and your onboarding process. Am I correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And the next thing I understand, Bart, is your training begins on day one.
Yes.
We don't
Even with our system, with our onboarding, I mean, it's literally, it starts with the order of the paperwork that they're filling out from the time we officially make them an offer. There is a specific order, a logical order that we give them each thing in order to make sure that they're going in the direction that we want to.
Right. And that this is what we're finding, Bart. Now that the systems are starting to be used, what we're finding is, and you tell me if this is happening with you, I'm having clients tell me today that when they're interviewing people and they're telling them these expectations, but then they show them, we've got a tool to help you do this. These new hires are getting very excited, and this is in the interview process. And when they get shown how they are now going to be trained with these new methods, because one of the things we found out is you're primarily going to be hiring under 35. Would that be correct, Bart?
Yep.
So that's what we would call the millennial age group. And I don't want anybody to get upset because I use the word millennial because it's not picking on millennials. But one thing that we have found out through research is that the millennial generation deals extremely well with virtual training. That is one of the advantages of virtual is, and there's so many different things. So when you talk online, you are probably going to be hiring millennials in going forward. And now we've got Generation Z coming out of high school now. And these people, these new recruits, they're going to be experienced with learning in this method because this is how they've been taught in school. So you're continuing the learning tools that they've used versus the classroom lecture of the past. Would that be correct?
That's absolutely correct. One thing that we have to stop and think about is that some of the people that we are interviewing for potential slots on our teams, they don't remember when there was not this thing called the internet. They have no recollection of that place in time, to where some of us that have got a few more years on us, we remember back when there wasn't anything like this, and we remember when it came on the scene. I mean, I can remember back when AOL was the big deal, back when the bulletin boards were the way to communicate. You could actually be typing to someone and they could be in New York or wherever, and I'm in the middle of Kansas, and that was the most astounding thing ever. We had the dial-up modems. Well, those guys, the guys and gals that we're interviewing now, they look at us like we've got a third head when we start talking about that, because they can't comprehend not having that capability right at their fingertips.
So they probably never watched The Graduate and Mrs. Robinson. Would you agree?
Probably not, unless they caught it on Netflix.
That's still a good one, man. That story hung with me. I tell you, but it's there. So Bart, here's the thing. A lot of people are hearing about virtual. There's different suppliers. I want to make it very clear. Even though CVC has a virtual platform, this presentation today is not to sell our platform. This presentation was to give you an experience with someone who is using a platform because it is the future. And to clarify it further, Bart, you have no return from any supplier, for you're a person that's using it. Would that be a good word to say?
Correct. I mean, I don't have any financial interest in any of this. My goal when you contacted me and asked me to be on the program was maybe I can relate something to somebody that listens to this podcast that will maybe turn a light bulb on, even if it's just a little glimmer that they can get a hold of and turn it into something that maybe could potentially change their business. And frankly, it's a big enough deal to where this could be a game changer for a business, for really for a life changer. I mean, it sounds like a big deal as far as being real deep, but I mean, it really is. It's once you get your head around the capabilities and the possibilities with this, it could be huge.
Yeah. So here's what we're faced with, Bart. We're in an industry, and you and I have been in it for a long time. We've both worked with NCSG, CSI. We both participate in Facebook discussions. We've done this for years. God, can you remember the bucket discussion, Bart?
Oh, buckets?
That's that's like, one time so everybody understands the biggest discussions ever happened on Facebook with chimney sweeps was how to separate buckets. In fact, I asked Bart the other week, we need to do a course on that. But Bart, we're faced with an industry that looks at this and here's the common, I'm just going to give you the thought processes. Well, I'm going to take a look at it when I get a chance. Well, I don't understand it or whatever. Now, you've learned a lot about the capabilities since you started using this. And I was shocked at the capabilities, and to be honest with you, I'm learning new things every day in putting a platform together. And the capabilities are growing every week. And, we're just amazed at what we can do virtual and what we can do live streaming that I never imagined just a few short years ago. So knowing the industry as I do, what's the words you would tell them? What would you share with them? Because this is making a tough choice. It's a change. That's the big thing. It is a change. A lot of times we look at it, when you go to a class, how do your employees get that information? Can you share it with them? And this is a way to, when you look at your cost of training, this is a way to greatly reduce training costs with your company. I recently did a survey and I came up that the average cost to train a new person could run $15,000 to $25,000 in this industry. And that's just to get them to a base level. So what do you tell these people to share with them to make that tough choice that maybe it's time for a change in the way you are bringing your new people online and why it's got to start from day one, not 30 days, not 60 days, but when they report to work, this system has to go into process then?
Well, I think there's several things on that. Number one, I think the the business owner is going to have to basically start living in Realville. And that's just a matter of, facing the facts of what your capabilities are, whether it's constrained by time, whether it's financial or whatever. Realistically, unless you are a very large company with the capability to assign a significant portion of your annual budget to developing training and rolling that out, you have no choice if you plan on growing and perhaps even surviving than to leverage your time and money on training your team members. The virtual learning programs, the platforms that are out there, they'll allow you to find a solution and find it quickly. Once you've found that, some key things that you do not want to do is you do not want to overthink it and get stalled out on the little things. The failure to implement can be huge. It's a matter of once you make the decision, you've got to pull the trigger and realize that there's a bullet coming out of the gun. So that means you've got to do something, because you'll never move towards that goal of growing your business, letting your business survive, or doing something if you don't take the step of defining what that goal is, take the second step of writing it down. You can't just keep it in your head. You have to get a date on it and then taking some action. A while back, I talked to somebody that asked me, well, if I had one word, what would I say that would be? And I said, faith. And that's not a religious sort of thing in any state of mind. It's just having faith or having hope. And I can tell you that once you implement a system with training, if you've got accountability on the part of the employer or the trainer, accountability on the part of the trainee, and if you stick to it, I will absolutely 100% guarantee that you are going to see results. The double-edged sword of that is you're also going to see pretty quickly if your results aren't quite what you expected, or if you need to make some adjustments. But until you start the process, put the key in the ignition and turn the key, you can't get the vehicle rolling down the road. Online training or virtual learning platforms, whatever you want to call them, they're another tool in your arsenal. And along with the tool, you've got to have the right attitude. Number one, you as the business owner, as the chief trainer, whatever your position is, you have to buy into the process. If you're going to expect your team to buy into the process, you've got to have a way to track it on a regular basis. You have to have a way, I feel, to incentivize it. You have to convey the fact that continual ongoing training is part of your company's culture, and this is where we're going. I'm going to lead the way. Come with me. You can't just say, go do this. You have to get out there and be ahead of your team. And you know what? It's an unfortunate fact that those who don't buy into this process, frankly, they may be a long-term member of your team. If they don't buy into your process and into your vision, you may need to purge those people, because if you leave somebody in your team that doesn't buy in, that's going to be like a rotten peach in a basket of good ones. There's nothing good that comes from that, and it just ruins all the rest of them. And it may be just a little bit at a time, but you're going to see that they detract from your vision and your goal with this. So that's the big thing, is just you've got to get it written down, get it dated, and then roll with it. And you're going to make some mistakes. I can tell you that since we've been on the online training platforms, I've messed a couple things up, but you know what? I got it fixed. Nobody died. Nobody bled to death. It was some mistakes on my part. So it's a learning part on my part as well. But it's so exciting just seeing the possibility of what we can do and where we can go with the help of industry professionals who are just, frankly, there's some guys on these platforms that are absolute legends. And we just had no way to get them tied into our individual businesses until just here recently.
You said a word in there, Bart, and I'm going to kind of end this in a minute. We're going to be done. But you said something about you may have to purge them. Well, I'm going to give you another way of looking at this. And I want to ask you the question. What happens if your employee tomorrow self-purges himself? One of my clients called me yesterday evening, because a long-term employee of his that had been there for many years did a great job. He turned in a notice yesterday, and the client thought he was set for the fall. And I told him, I said, well, let's look on the bright side. We've got all the programs. We got everything ready to go. Now you just got to bear down to the program, because he picked the greatest time of the year to do it. If you're going to quit, wouldn't this be a good time to quit? Now you got time before that D-Day. I call September 1 in this business D-Day. Everything's got to be ready. So if you get on to the ball game, but not just if you purge them, what happens if your people self-purge? This is systems that can help you through that. Would you agree, Bart?
I agree. And here's the advantage of having a system, a formalized training system to get from point A to point B in a logical manner in a certain number of days. It takes away so much of the, oh my God, what am I going to do? I just lost Bill. He's my lead guy. Because you can sit back and say, okay, I got this, because I have to start the hiring process, and really everyone should be hiring all the time, not just when you need help. You need to be ahead of that curve. But you'll know that, let's say you need 100 days or 120 days, maybe it's 200 days, whatever your particular system sets out that you're comfortable with. But you should be able to take those days and basically count backwards in the calendar and find out, okay, this is kind of when my D-Day for starting trainee Joe will be, is I need to be ready about this time. So it takes a lot of the ambivalence of, well, yeah, we got to get somebody hired at some point. It puts some self-imposed deadlines on you as a business owner to know that, okay, if I'm going to make that work, then I have to accomplish this before that. And to accomplish this, then I have to start this other stuff before that even. So it gives you a logical calendar, similar to a marketing calendar in a business. Instead of just, when a phone rep comes in or a TV rep or a radio rep comes in and wants to sell you something, and you just say, oh, well, yeah, let's give that a shot. You have a formalized plan that's budgeted as far as the money that's going to be there and the time that you're going to spend. Because frankly, at the end of the day, it's almost the time that we invest in someone is almost worth more than what we would pay them during a training process. And here's something else that I want to add. Let's say your goal is to hire let's say your goal is to hire one technician by September 1st. You should know that you may have to hire 3 guys. But let's say you hire 3 guys or gals. I don't want to be sexist or anything, but let's say you hire 3 people and you have a 150-day training program or whatever it is. Make up your number. And you can literally go into that process and tell them that of the 3 of you, 1 is going to make it through this process. And you can lead with that. But you always have the option as the business owner to change your mind. So your best case scenario is, I'm going to get 1 good person out of these 3. Your worst case scenario, you don't get any, but you're not stuck with with those people who aren't the right people. If you set the deadlines in there and you tell them that these are my expectations, and if you can't meet these expectations, then you will not continue the training process here. So it's a matter of having a logical system, logically thought out with time frames on it, that you as a business owner can make good decisions on, because you're getting good information and good feedback throughout your process.
Bart, I want to thank you a lot. You spent a lot of time. Everybody knows this is Saturday afternoon when we're recording this. You just closed the store earlier today and closed the business down for a day, and that's why we set up this time. But Bart has shared with you a tremendous amount of personal insight, and it's all about a process. The process is called e-learning. It's called virtual. It's called LMS. It's called learning management systems. There's all kinds of names for it. And the thing is, it's not the future. It's today, and it is reality, and it is a tool that can help you move to your dreams, and it can do it. Bart, you agree with that?
I do. And, it comes back to the old adage of, if you say I'll do it tomorrow, tomorrow never comes. You got to pull the trigger today.
That's it. So, Bart, I want to appreciate you being here today. This is Jerry Eisenhower with the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, and I want you to encourage you. I've got a new book coming out, and it's all about training. It's based on the research. Look it up. It'll be on Amazon any day now. Look that up. Look us up if we can help you. Again, The entire intent of this podcast today was to open people's eyes to the potential of virtual training, e-learning, and how it can move your company and your business model to where you want to go. Tune in to us every week here on the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.
Thanks for joining us here each week at the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, sponsored by CVC Coaching, providing you the coaching and educational outreach services you need to move to your dream destination in business and in life.